Good day, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Delos Santos. Here are today's top stories. Hot money outflow slowed further in August as the Bangko Sentral continued to raise borrowing rates.
President Bongbong Marcos secures nearly $4 billion worth of investment pledges from his recent trip to the United States. Malacanang says these could generate at least 100,000 jobs for Filipinos.
Heads up consumers in Metro Manila and nearby provinces beginning January 2023, you may have to pay more for your water bills. The culprit, the peso's depreciation against the dollar.
And Japan Sumitomo Mitsui bags the 27 billion peso contract to build 2 stations and tunnels of the Metro Manila subway project. Let's begin our broadcast with hot money outflows dropping to a 3-month low in August. Now, data from the Bangko Sentral showed that short-term foreign investment outflows amounted to $86 million last month. That's 16% lower than the $103 million outflows recorded in the month of July. There's also a reversal from the net inflows of $11.5 million in August of 2021. Now, foreign investments registered with the Bangko Sentral through authorized bank agents are often referred to as hot money due to the ease with which they enter and exit financial markets. Investors typically want to secure the best short-term rates possible. Economists said outflows in August were lower as investors took into account the Bangko Sentral's aggressive stance to combat inflation. The Monetary Board has so far increased policy rates by 225 basis points this year, including its off-cycle 75 bip hike in July and the back-to-back 50 basis point increases in August and September.
President Bongbong Marcos' recent trip to the United States has yielded $3.9 billion or more than 200 billion pesos worth of investment pledges from various sectors. The biggest chunk of the investment pledges came from data centers at $3 billion. Pledges from the IT/BPM sector is pegged at $55 million, while those from the manufacturing sector reached almost $850 million. The palace says these investment pledges could generate over 112,000 jobs for Filipinos. Some 100,000 of these will be under the IT/BPM sector, while 9,000 will be under data centers and 850 under manufacturing. The estimates exclude potential investments from several American companies that President Marcos and trade officials met while in New York. Malacanang said some companies had expressed interest in considering new investments in the country, but their plans have yet to be firmed up. So our guest today was in attendance as the president met with U.S. business leaders in New York. Let's try to get more details from him as to what went on in that meeting and what commitments should we be expecting. We have on the show Joey Concepcion, founder of Negosyo. Joey, thank you for joining us today. Again, $3.9 billion worth of investment pledges from that U.S. trip. Lion's share, of course, coming from data centers, followed by BPOs and then manufacturing. You were there in those meetings. At least those that you can share with us, can you give us more specifics? Which firms exactly made those commitments? What are they pledging and how long before we get to see the ball rolling on those commitments?
Well, first of all, I think this was a very good trip of the president to really go to America. It's been so long a time since a president has been there, and together with the president, of course, was his cabinet and, of course, the private sector, who also played quite an important role. And a number of investors who attended the meeting are already invested in the Philippines. What was very important to see is that the presentation of the economic team and the hearing it from the president themselves is something different. It creates greater confidence that the Philippines is serious about really opening its doors to the investors and making sure that everything will be a fair game in the Philippines, and that those who have invested in the Philippines, the Philippines government is committed to ensure that whatever it has agreed on will be honored. No? And I think that is something very reassuring to many of these investors. No? And they can see basically a good roadmap, no, that the economic team has put forward. And as investors, they want to be reassured that the Philippines will be conducive to really an open economy. And of course, the private sector, Doriso Magsaysaho held the Asia Society meeting with a number of investors. And there was really full of optimism. No? And we, despite the headwinds that we had during the pandemic, we explained that the public-private partnership in this health crisis really helped us cross over, no? And the economy of the Philippines now is back on track. And very clear from President Marcos' statement that the same arrangement between the public and private sector is what is key to really the economic resurgence of the Philippines today. No? Despite the headwinds coming again because of rising inflation, no? Which America is trying to quell as fast as possible with raising interest rates, but it's causing a lot of currencies all over the world to really weaken versus the U.S. dollar, which is creating more pressure on commodities being more costly. You know?
Well, the pledges, though, that we got from the U.S. somehow pales in comparison to what we had, or at least what the president had during his visit in Indonesia and Singapore. I mean, that amounted to around $8.5 billion and $6.5 billion, respectively. Why is that, do you think? And what does that say exactly?
Well, you know, all of these pledges are pledges. No? They will have to happen. No? And these are targeted numbers, and people have made these pledges. Now, what's important is that regardless of whether Indonesia had the pledge of 8 billion and America had the close to 4 billion, these are huge amounts. No? And I think this, for example, like in America, I mean, with that investor sentiment now of seeing a president that is really opening the doors to especially more foreign investment and assuring that the foreign investors that it's going to be a fair game, that brings much more the needed confidence. And that's what we want to see. And being there, I can see that everybody was in smiles. I mean, they were very pleased with the very candid discussion of the president together with the investors. And I think that's what's important. There was a series of meetings, and there were about 3 investor meetings that were held. So everybody was quite busy. The private sector giving the full support to the government was very essential. And I, after going through this first state visit in the America in a long time, I'm glad that it was done, and I'm much more optimistic. As you know, America is a very strong supporter of the Philippines, and strengthening our relationship with America, especially in times like this, is very important. So I think it's good, and a lot of Filipinos reside in America today, either as nurses, working as nurses, doctors, and many others. So I'm very optimistic, and I'm glad that this state visit was done.
Sir, circling back to what you mentioned earlier on, the U.S. is of course facing its own share of headwinds, inflation at 40-year high, and a looming recession now pegged at 98% chance of a recession. What was the sentiment of the U.S. investors with regard to putting their money in emerging markets like the Philippines at a time when their economy is in itself facing some headwinds?
Well, many of these investors are long-term investors, and it's part of the game in the sense that there are risks involved. But we all know that all of these things will come to pass. For example, what's happening in America is that they are very aggressive in wanting to tame the inflation, and that's why you see a very aggressive move towards increasing interest rates. And we and other countries have been following suit, but not at that same level. And that's why you see that the American dollar really becoming extremely too strong. And you can see the euro, the yen, the pound, the peso, and all currencies have collapsed versus the US dollar. No, but all of these will eventually change. Now, of course, while they're trying to tame inflation, they have to be careful. No, that if you overdo it, then you will have a recession, no, which we don't want to see. And so I believe that they are really managing it well. And in the Philippines, these headwinds, on top of the pandemic and on top of rising prices because of the Ukraine-Russia crisis, which has further escalated, things can get worse. And let's just pray that it doesn't go to that extreme. No? So we are definitely, not only the Philippines, but the entire world is moving towards stronger headwinds. No? And we will just have to navigate through this whole, I'd say, turbulence. But again, what's important is that briefing our investors, similar to our companies, in the private sector, as we are public, we have to always keep in touch with our investors, and keep them, be transparent with them and what's really happening. And so that's how you build confidence with the investors, whether they invest in our companies or whether they invest in the Philippines.
Sir, what was the wish list of U.S. investors with regard to ease of doing business in the Philippines or possible legislation changes?
Well, again, ease of doing business was one of the big challenges, and one of those points that were made, and Secretary Pascual addressed all of those. And as you know, that we are moving towards a greater level of digitalization, which the Philippine government is trying to do, so that will help smoothen out, and hopefully make the ease of doing business really work in the Philippines. So that's a priority of the Marcos government to really focus on that area.
Very quickly, the president himself has also said, at least in an interview with Bloomberg, that he is open to the idea of at least purchasing fuel from Russia. Do you see that becoming a future roadblock here in the realization of these investments coming from the U.S.?
Well, I think what we have to do is to try to get us through these challenging times. And if there are, similar to when Ukraine and Russia was allowed to export wheat, of course, we don't buy Ukraine wheat. We only buy American wheat because of the needs of our own bake shops and bakeries. They want high-protein wheat. But of course, I think if those alternatives are in place, I think the Marcos administration will make what is the right choice for its people. And anything that can really help tame down inflation in the Philippines, we should look into.
And now, of course, the attention shifting dramatically from the pandemic this time, of course, to the economic downturns that we're experiencing. How big of a concern still is the health crisis, and how do we move forward from this?
Well, I've been telling, especially our ACE group and the Advisory Council of Experts that I put together, and many of them are still concerned about the level of infection moving up. And I've told them that, we know that Omicron is highly contagious, but we've seen it to be mild. And of course, there are exceptions to this. There are cases that may be more severe, and that's why we encourage boostering. And we encourage also people to wear their mask. And the removal of the mandate on outdoor masks was very important for us to open up tourism. In other words, who will come to the Philippines? So now we're competing against many other countries who removed their outdoor face masks. You have to do that. Or else people would just go to Thailand and other countries. Japan has opened up. So every country right now is opening up and bringing down certain health protocols. Now, for as long as their healthcare utilization levels remain to acceptable levels, and it's way below 50% to today, we should just continue to open up. We cannot restrict mobility. Of course, concerns whether the IT BPO sector wants more work from home. I think there should be a balance really from managing work from home, because pushing it too far, then you will have less mobility, which we don't want to see, especially as we reach towards the fourth quarter of this year. This is the strongest quarter that we have. And many MSMEs get to rebound. So if they did bad in the first, second, and third quarter, the last quarter is very crucial for them to be able to pay their employees their 13-month pay and to pay their bank amortizations, which fall due. No?
Of course, the war is not yet won completely, no? So still some vigilance there, especially if we want to reopen the economy safely and attract these investments. Thank you so much, Go Negosyo founder Joey Concepcion.
Thank you.
Now let's pause for a quick break, but coming right up after that. The damage to agriculture left by Typhoon Karding climbs to more than 2 billion pesos.
More of that and other stories when Business World Live returns. Stay with us.
You're still watching Business World Live here in One News. I'm Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel.
President Bongbong Marcos vowed to utilize efficiently the funding support provided by the Asian Development Bank. The President made the assurance at ADB's 55th annual meeting of the Board of Governors. In his speech, the President thanked the ADB for its help in mitigating the effects of the pandemic. He also recognized the Manila-based lender as the Philippine government's partner in achieving the country's development goals.
As President, it is certainly my duty to ensure that the government remains committed in the efficient and effective utilization of this institution's assistance for the full benefit of all Filipinos.
The President also rallied for unity in developing a green economy as the country gears toward the post-pandemic world.
We must develop an economy that is green, that is sustainable, truly climate resilient, and responsive to people's immediate needs. It is an economy that takes into account the ecosystem from which we harness our resources. And what other international institution on our shores comes to mind that does that support better than the ADB?
Meat traders are urging President Marcos to cut the tariff on imported pork for the next 5 years to ensure food security and tame inflation. In a letter, the Meat Importers and Traders Association said the African swine fever, or ASF, remains a risk to the industry. The group also noted that output of major pork-producing regions in the world, including Europe and North America, have dropped by as much as 3%. With this, the traders say Marcos should issue an executive order that would reinstate import duty rates on pork to 5% for in-quota and 15% for out-quota purchases. This order would be similar to that issued by former President Rodrigo Duterte last year when pork prices soared due to supply disruptions caused by the ASF outbreak.
Damage to agriculture left by Typhoon Karding has climbed to over 2 billion pesos. This is based on assessments conducted by the Department of Agriculture in at least 6 regions, including Western Visayas. As of Thursday, September 29th, there are nearly 92,000 farmers and fisherfolk affected by the typhoon. The DA says it has set aside a quick response fund worth 500 million pesos for the rehabilitation of affected areas.
Kumulang sa 170 million ang rice seeds na aming pamimigay. 23.16 million worth of corn seeds and 13.5 million worth of assorted vegetable seeds. Ganun din, ang kumulang sa 2.45 million ang worth of animal heads, drugs and biologics for livestock and poultry. Mga fingerlings at kagamitan para sa apektadong mga isda.
A water rate hike is on the horizon as the peso inches to 60 against the greenback. The Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage says the effects of the weakening peso will reflect in consumers' bills as early as January next year. However, the MWSS assures the public that it will minimize the burden on consumers as much as possible.
It will have an effect, definitely. But we will try our best to minimize or at least spread this increase through the next 5 years. So yan ang balak po natin na hindi mo sana mabigla ang ating mga consumers.
Well, Maynilad says it will take into consideration the cost of energy and the weakening peso in its ongoing rate rebasing. The Securities and Exchange Commission has issued guidelines that will allow firms to solve intra-corporate disputes through arbitration without going to court. These guidelines operationalize a section of the revised Corporation Code which provides that an arbitration agreement may be provided in the Articles of Incorporation or through the bylaws of a corporation. The rules define arbitration as a voluntary dispute resolution process in which arbitrators resolve a dispute by rendering an award. However, disputes that involve criminal offenses and interests of third parties shall be excluded from arbitration.
Japanese firm Sumitomo has bagged a 27 billion peso contract for the Manila subway project. The Department of Transportation has issued a notice of award to Sumitomo on September 23rd for the construction of the Anonas and Katipunan stations of the subway. The contract also includes the construction of tunnels for the country's first underground railway system.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. But don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Businessworld Live here on One News. Finally, the last day of September. But can we look forward? Before we look forward to hopefully a better October, give us a look back on what happened in the past month.
All right. Well, I'm looking at the percentage change, in a month. You can see here at least 3%, 8% for the S&P 500. Europe as well, not doing any better. And if you take a look at Asia Pacific, same story here. I mean, in Hong Kong, for example, more than 13% down. In Japan, 6% down. It's the probably least hit, but it's really double-digit pain here. And let's take a look, of course, at our own local bourse. How did we do in the month of September, Jess? And I really don't want to see, oh my God, especially since it's 5,700 already today, levels that we have not seen in so long. I think 2020 even 2.3% down here. Yes, and let's take a quick peek at the movers here of the day. If there are any bright spots, just two. You've got Meralco and AC Energy. Everyone else from Converge to Mondenise, and a pretty painful sight here. Let's take a look at the 1 month performance of the local bourse, and we know that this follows, of course, very closely on the heels of what's happening over in the U.S., but we did seem to be even worse than the S&P 500, down by 13% in just 1 month. Now, let's look at one bright spot, perhaps, and that is the financial space, Jess. Even as today, it is still also having some pain here. This, as Moody's says, that at least the bad loans will be easing until 2024 compared to what they were seeing in pandemic. We've actually seen the loan ratio, the soured loan ratio, falling for 5 straight months until the month of July, which means that people are paying back at least their loans. And they did mention that inflation would dampen the asset quality of the banks, but they don't expect it to derail entirely, especially as people have more money to perhaps spend and pay back. But hopefully, of course, all of these headwinds settle down as we move into October tomorrow, Jess.
Well, hopefully that happens. I mean,
September has ended.
Let's see if things are going to wake up.
Exactly.
Come October. That's it for today, September 30, 2022. Join us again Monday next week at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. Stay safe, Philippines. Have a restful weekend. We are One News, all sides, all the time.